This is Mastering Your Wealth with David Gagnon, the podcast.
So if you're looking for a possible New Year's tax gift from Uncle Sam, look no further than the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that was passed last year. It sets aside a $6,000 deduction for seniors starting in tax year of 2025. Here's tax guru Ed Slott on Morningstar.
It's a senior deduction. It's called in the law deduction for seniors. You get it if you're 65. That's all you have to be. It's 65, and you qualify for a $6,000 deduction, and it has some income limits. They're kind of low thresholds, but a lot of seniors will qualify for the $6,000 deduction, and it's a below-the-line deduction. It doesn't change your adjusted gross income. It doesn't change the amount of Social Security that will be taxable.
Okay, so let's kind of break this down here. I mean, obviously that sounds great, right? I mean, it's definitely good to know that through 2028, that tax year, that this deduction expires then. But this reminds us that retirement taxes aren't just about filing a return. It's really about managing income in a year-by-year basis, right? So that the government doesn't get any more money than they're entitled to. So what does it mean to step up from a tax filing to tax planning?
Yes, they're both very different. So when we look at tax filing, it's really looking in the rearview mirror, and that's when you're preparing your return and you're looking back to what happened last year in your tax return, and that's fine. But the real tax planning opportunities lie in taking an approach that's tax planning, looking into the future. It's like steering the car, right? You're going down the road and you want to find the most efficient way to get to a destination, and it's like following a GPS. And we always talk about having a financial GPS where we know where you are today and where you're trying to get to through all those years of retirement. So in retirement, you're going to have multiple income sources that are going to be on your return. And there's a lot of different things that it can impact what you pay in taxes, such as the order and the timing of what withdrawals you take and from what sources you might get them from. So people might have sources that they can be proactive in their planning where they have different tax types of income sources. Maybe you have a Roth, you have a tax-free bucket you can draw from. Maybe you have pre-tax retirement accounts, and then you have taxable investments. Other types of income that could be taxed differently is taking capital gains from your investments, maybe doing some charitable planning. There's strategies there that can help you create some tax deductions and some financial benefits. So there's a lot of moving parts in looking forward, being proactive, and have a forward-looking tax reduction strategy. And what we try to do, we try to map out a 3 to 5 year tax forecast so we can manage amongst different tax brackets for your income needs, especially in the retirement years before your required minimum distributions start, which for some folks is going to be age 73 and some others, depending on your age, is going to be 75. You know, it's so important to take a look at into the future with what you have available today to become more tax efficient, tax diversified. And a lot of times it comes down to doing possibly some Roth conversions or Roth alternative conversions so that in the latter years you're more tax efficient and you can control the required minimum distribution amounts that might be substantial for some folks, but we want to try to mitigate those taxes years ahead of the time that they're going to have to take them. So a lot of things impact your tax return. Tax laws are very complicated, and that's why I think it's important to work with somebody that has experience in being tax efficient, but also financially efficient and putting together these comprehensive plans. So if you really want to take a look into the future and become more tax efficient, maybe you don't have a tax plan in place, give us a call. Let us do a tax review analysis to see if there's some opportunities that you might be missing to save some taxes along the way throughout your retirement.
203-872-0009, 203-872-0009. And again, that website, masteringyourwealthradio.com.
You know, when we talked about tax planning, I mean, this can impact many people at different wealth levels, but you don't have to have a lot of wealth to really be in a position to save taxes in the future. And as you just said, if you're saving taxes, you're putting more in your pocket and you have more spendable income. Recently, we just worked with a retired couple, and they were about ready to set it and forget it mentality when they retired. They had this large IRA rollover. And when we did our analysis and we showed how they're going to defer this big IRA into the future, because they had some savings that they were going to live on for the meantime in the next 6 to 7 years. And these were after-tax dollars. And what was going to happen when we did the analysis, we saw that their taxable income was going to spike in the future because that allowed their tax-deferred retirement accounts just to get bigger. And they weren't familiar with what the required minimum distributions were going to look like in their own numbers. And had they not seen this in time, they would have ended up taking very high required minimum distributions, and it also would have put them into a much higher income bracket that would have increased their Medicare Part B premiums for the rest of their retirement. So what we did was, since we had some time ahead before the RMDs were going to kick in, we started a Roth conversion process, and we managed the conversions to keep them in targeted tax bracket for the next 5 years. And what we were able to do is reduce that RMD pressure down the road, so it allowed them to build a bigger tax-free bucket. And so this is what's so important. Look into the future with what you're doing today, because we can see the opportunities or the problems that lie ahead. And a lot of times we're dealing with people that have done such a great job in saving in their pre-tax retirement accounts, but they don't see this tax torpedo coming when the required minimum distributions are going to force them to take income in many cases that they may not need. So if you're approaching retirement, the best time to upgrade your plan is take a look at it now. Let's take a look at where you are today, and we can see what problems lie ahead and implement some opportunities to really employ some great tax planning.
203-872-0009. 203-872-0009. That website, of course, masteringyourwealthradio.com. As we talked about here, it is a new year. You know, a lot of folks have New Year's resolutions. Maybe you're hitting the gym. Maybe you're going to skip fast food, whatever it is. A lot of people try to stick to these goals, these resolutions, so to speak. Maybe you're thinking, well, my New Year's resolution is to get serious about my finances, get serious about my retirement and planning for that income for life that I'm going to need in retirement. For those that are maybe just starting this journey, David, and let's be honest, it can be overwhelming starting to think about the next 30, 40 years of your life. And have you planned enough? Have you saved enough? What's the best way to get started with you if this is their first glance at what retirement could be?
Well, the first appointment should be a phone call or a Zoom or in-person meeting, just to kind of see what you've been doing up to this point with your finances, and then set some goals that you might have. What age do you want to retire? And what do you think your spending is going to be? I mean, we can just have a very high-level conversation, so I get a better sense as to what you're worried about, what your concerns are. And then when we compile all your data, I always take a look at everything, not just your investments and your assets, but your liabilities, your cash flow, your tax return, because all those components affect your money, and all your decisions in all those different areas will affect your money, good or bad. And so what we can do is quantify your numbers, look into the future with what your planning objectives are as far as when you want to retire, and what type of spending level you're going to want to sustain your lifestyle through all the years you think you're going to live, and see how that looks without any changes. And doing an investment analysis alongside that is very important, because what we find is people are taking too much risk in how they're investing their money. They're not getting the returns they need for that corresponding risk, and they're not aligned in the right investment tools to be aligned with their planning objectives, whether it's for income, capital preservation, growth, tax efficiency. And there's a lot of information that we'll derive from that first pass when we look into the future with what they're doing today. And now we can have a more meaningful conversation of what's working for them and what isn't, and then have a discussion about the different planning strategies and approaches that can enhance everything you're doing with a high level of efficiency and take much less risk. And once we get to a place where there's a plan in place, and the income distribution plan is so important, especially in the retirement, now they see in their own numbers how they're invested, why they're invested, and where their money's going to come from at what time in their life. And once we have a plan that's structured and designed, it doesn't mean that it's a set it and forget it. It's never that way, because when people are clients, we have to have ongoing reviews to make sure we tweak everything to keep them on track, because things change. The investment world changes, your spending might change, tax laws change. So once we have the initial plan in place, then it's easy to help validate what you can realistically do in retirement as far as your spending and make adjustments accordingly if things come up that weren't planned for.
And again, that phone number, 203-872-0009, 203-872-0009. That website, masteringyourwealthradio.com. So if I were to tell you that Miss Dolly Parton, she has amassed 11 Grammys, 10 CMAs, 3 Emmys, and a host of other awards over the course of her long career, you probably wouldn't be surprised. I mean, she's Dolly Parton after all. But the fact that she's still going strong as she hits 80 later this month makes it worth listening to what she says.
Everybody said, well, you're 80 years old. You're going to be 80 years old. I said, well, so what? Look at all I've done in 80 years. I just feel like I'm just getting started. I know that sounds stupid, but I think there's a lot to be said about age. If you allow yourself to get old, you will. And people say, well, how come you don't seem to get old? I said, because I ain't got time to get old. I ain't got time to dwell on that. That's not what I'm thinking about. I think, what? They're going to celebrate me being 80? You know, not that anybody would want to celebrate that. So I don't know what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. New things will come. And whatever comes, I'll give it my best.
I love that. Yeah, new things to come, and whatever comes, I'll give it my best. And listen, we talk about that all the time. There's a lot of 80-year-olds out there, even like your father, 96, gets up every day, hits the treadmill, he's still driving. Kind of comes down to that. If you don't use it, you lose it. If you're sitting on the couch for the next 40 years, it's not going to be good for you.
Yeah, my dad's been in retirement since the age of 60, so that puts him out 36 years. It's been a good ride for him because he had a pension along the way, along with his Social Security. And that's a big advantage. If you have a pension, you can make mistakes in your working years and still make it work in your retirement years because you have that fallback on the pension. But I'm finding that so many people today aren't going to receive pensions. That's where planning is going to be so critical for those folks. Yet I don't see enough people doing it or taking it seriously enough until it's too late. So what we like to do is we design a retirement like a multi-decade business plan, right? We look at income, we look at growth needs, we look at flexibility in what you need to do along the way with your finances. And so we'll segment the plan and we'll look at short-term cash needs. We're going to look at midterm income needs and long-term growth. So there's a lot of different components when you're planning out a long-term period into the future. You also have to plan for rising costs for healthcare, inflation factors. They have to really be built into the math and stress tested at different levels because one of the things that is derailing many retirements is the out-of-pocket healthcare, whether it's home healthcare, long-term care. I have families going through this. I always have families going through this because we deal with so many elderly clients. And then we also want to really look at tax diversification. We always talk about tax efficiency planning because if you're finding ways to legally pay the least amount that you're required to because we're utilizing tax laws to your advantage, that just gives you more spendable income or more dollars in your pocket, growing more wealth over time. And so we're always going to look at being tax diversified. And there's certain formulas that you need to follow in the amount you put into taxable investments, tax deferred and tax free. And then you always want to stress test your plan. You want to look at higher inflation or longer life expectancies or out-of-pocket medical events. So you want to see the outcomes before you actually fall into them and have to live them. Because if you're planning for this and you have these backup strategies, then you're going to be in a better position when the events, if they do occur, arise. You know, we had a couple that we planned for 20 years out. We were looking at longevity in their planning because they felt on both sides of their family at least one of them was going to live well into their 90s and the other into the late 80s. And we did their first pass. We looked into the future with their analysis, and we saw that age 87 was kind of the point where they were going to be out of money. So what we did was we just adjusted their spending strategy, reduced their portfolio cost, and added some lifetime income, guaranteed income features into their income plan. Now that solved the income gap that we could see in the future when we did that first analysis. So living long is great. It's a blessing for a lot, and it's even a better blessing if you have quality of life. But we see that too many people, unfortunately, aren't having a good time in retirement because the health has failed and they're spending a lot of the money on their health care. But it's always good to have a plan and a backup strategy for some of these events that could occur but may not.
For more details or to sit down with David for your complimentary financial GPS, visit masteringyourwealthradio.com.
Investment advisory services offered through Brookstone Wealth Advisors, LLC, BWA, a registered investment advisor and an affiliate of Brookstone Capital Management, LLC. BWA and First Financial Planners are independent of each other. Insurance products and services are not offered through BWA, but are offered and sold through individually licensed and appointed agents.
Information provided is not intended as tax or legal advice and should not be relied on as such. You are encouraged to seek tax or legal advice from an independent professional.
Any comments regarding safe and secure products and guaranteed income streams refer only to fixed insurance products. They do not refer in any way to securities or investment advisory products. Fixed insurance and annuity product guarantees are subject to the claims paying ability of the issuing company and are not offered by Brookstone.
David Gagnon and First Financial Planners are not affiliated with nor endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency.
Registered investment advisors and investment advisor representatives act as fiduciaries for all of our investment management clients. We have an obligation to act in the best interest of our clients and to make full disclosure of any conflicts of interest. Please refer to our firm brochure of the ADV 2A Item 4 for additional information.